Okay, I want to preface, before we go to our guest here, with just some basic history. In mainline Roman history, and you learn that Julius Caesar's family actually got political power through this over several generations, fire departments were set up in the big city of Rome, and if your neighborhood did not pay them the fire department fee, they would set fires and burn down your neighborhood. And over time, it grew into a protection racket. The Sicilian Mafia in the last 200 years in Italy and the United States, in places like New York and Boston and other places, didn't invent coming to your grocery store or your laundry or your restaurant or your church and saying, you need to pay us protection money or somebody's going to burn down your grocery store. I'm not saying who's going to do it, but if you pay me a little protection money and hire my cousin, he'll watch out and make sure nobody burns down your grocery store. And, of course, it's the cousin smiling at you from behind the capo that's going to burn down your grocery store. There was a case of this in New York, I don't know, it was a decade ago, got a lot of attention, so I use it as an example, where somebody with ball-peen hammers knocked out hundreds of car windows for years. And folks noticed that there were billboards everywhere for a company that had shops all over the areas that would fix your windshield for the lowest price. And finally, it was discovered when one of the workers blew the whistle that he had upwards of 8 people going out every night knocking dings in windshields with a ball-peen hammer. Now, that's a false flag, business attack. There's been a lot of evidence that major virus companies are hiring hackers to release viruses that they then already have the fix to. I mean, this really is common sense. Governments in the West the last 100 years have made drugs illegal because the big powerful interests control the drugs being brought in. Now they can shut down their competition with the law they've bought off, and they can make larger profits because it's now a black market item. This is all really just cause and effect, common sense. Hitler firebombing his own Reichstag, that's now been released and confirmed. Hitler blowing up his own military base, blaming it on the Poles to attack Poland and say, oh, look, the Poles attacked our base, our communications base. They even dressed up prisoners and shot them in Polish uniforms and German uniforms to show newsreels of dead bodies. That's how World War II started. That's publicly admitted. So the point is, you know governments do this. You know Gulf of Tonkin was staged to get us into Vietnam saying our ships were attacked. They said it was a conspiracy theory for 40 years. When on the 40th anniversary, the CIA declassified they staged it. We already knew because officers on the ships came back and reported, no, we weren't attacked. That was in the San Diego paper back in '64. But it becomes a rumor, a legend. People heard it was staged. Well, later it came out it was staged. And there's Operation Gladio, over 200 U.S. bombings carried out with NATO in Europe. Their favorite thing was to blow up school buses because that really got folks upset. Then they would grab a patsy, shoot him in the head, and say that, you know, they had committed the bombing of the school bus. So it's time to grow up. The Russians do it. The Tsars did it before the communists. Every major government does this. And the argument in the Pentagon is, others are doing it, we got to do it. You got Operation Northwoods, where the Pentagon proposed to Kennedy to blow up D.C., bomb Miami, hijack jets by remote control, crash them, blame it on the Russians, start World War III. Kennedy said no, and they said, well, then we're going to just take you out. Now, all of that goes on. All of that is happening. And you know, I've talked a lot about this because it was in Newsweek, it was in major newspapers that the hijackers were trained at U.S. bases. And it came out but was never discussed again. And the head of the Defense Language School, Colonel Butler, went public and said, some of these guys were at our school. I recognize them. Something's going on. The government's behind this. And then they started a court-martial against him, and he shut up, and they dropped the court-martial. So all of that said, I wanted to play this clip before we go to our guest from England for the rest of the hour, and we appreciate his courage in going public and losing his job over this. And I actually have some of the local papers that reported on it here. But bombshells, Saudi and U.S. government protected hijackers. And, of course, I mean, who set up al-Qaeda? Saudi Arabia, the U.S., England, and Israel, along with Pakistan intelligence in 1979. Zbigniew Brzezinski has written 2 books in the last 5 years bragging about it. It's the same groups working together. We've had Mr. Springman, the former head of the visa section of the embassy on, where they were ordered. It's been in the Toronto Star. I had him on 9 years ago. But I've had him on since. Mr. Springman, I talked to his colleagues. They were ordered to let Mohammed Atta and others back into the U.S. what, 8 months before 9/11, even though they were flagged as terrorists in their database, and the CIA, when they wouldn't let them in, had the State Department call and say, look, they work for us, that's a cover. The underwear bomber, Undersecretary of State Kennedy admits they were ordered to help get him on the plane by an unnamed U.S. agency and to give them the visa. We knew it a month and a half before because our listeners, lawyers, the Haskells, husband and wife lawyers, were on and saw the guy being got on the plane, thought it was suspicious, didn't have his passport, saw the whole firecracker deal right as they roll out. I mean, it's all staged. Now, Fast and Furious, shipping guns in to the drug dealers to then blame it on the Second Amendment. Now they've announced the gun control because of their own operation. It's happening. I mean, they know what they're doing. And so it's time to grow up and realize this is happening. Now, here is former governor of Florida, former Senator and Florida Governor Bob Graham said at least 2 of the purported 9/11 hijackers had assistance from Saudi Arabia. Graham's recently released novel Keys to the Kingdom implicates the Saudis. He told MSNBC the novel is based on factual information. Let's go ahead and play that clip from MSNBC.
Well, just briefly, Thomas, there are some unquestioned facts that Saudi Arabia was providing significant assistance to at least 2 of the 19 hijackers living in San Diego. The questions are, why was Saudi Arabia doing this? Was it also providing assistance to the other 17 hijackers? And then why did the United States go to such lengths, including censuring the Congressional Inquiry's report on the events leading up to 9/11 that related to the role of Saudi Arabia? So there are a lot of unanswered questions, and Keys to the Kingdom starts with finding those answers.
If you say that 40% of what's in this book is fact,
okay,
you think
there we go.
Going to allow for avenues of discussion?
Oh, that's good. All right, now we are going to our guest, Tony Farrell, served as a high-level intelligence analyst for South Yorkshire Police in Britain from 98 to 2010. In the days preceding the 5th anniversary of the 7/7 bombings, Farrell discovered the 9/11 attacks and 7/7 attacks were acts of state-sponsored terror. And Jaron gave me a more detailed bio on him. He has a university degree in applied statistics, Sheffield, Hallam University, if I'm reading that right. Postgraduate degree in criminal intelligence analytics and analysis, Manchester University. Postgrad degree, management studies, Sheffield. And we continue on from there, studying future threats. And he was the head of the South Yorkshire Police of their program to analyze terror attacks and threats. And he joins us now, former intelligence analyst. And I have some of the news articles here dealing with it. Police Intelligence Analyst fired for blowing whistle on false flag. Terror, strategic threat assessment matrix concluded 7/7 was an inside job. Tony Farrell is our guest going over that. And we also have mainstream British reports where they admit that most of the IRA bombings were actually run by British intelligence and British Army officers, some of which we've interviewed here. One of them got killed after he was on the show. Not trying to scare folks, just telling you this is not a game. Mr. Farrell, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your courage.
Thank you, Alex, and it's a pleasure to be on.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, your years of research, and what brought you to going public with this information, and what the police department thought when you brought them this information.
Well, I've been working for the police service as a principal analyst since 1998, and had local government experience, and also worked for the regional government office, which is part of the Home Office, doing research into crime. So I was quite experienced as a civilian. I wasn't a police officer. And I was used to doing the strategic work. I wasn't privy to the detailed terrorist information from Special Branch, but I did take an overview of the sanitized versions and pull them together in a strategic net. That was my assignment, my annual assignment. And what happened, Alex, was that, as you say, a week up to leading up to the 2010 July the 7th 5-year anniversary, I was merely going along with my assignment, believing that I was just going to be able to complete it without any problems. And unfortunately, for me, running concurrently was my home study that was into things like the history of geopolitics and what was going on in the world and a bit of church history. And all of a sudden, with a week to go, Alex, I dropped on, through the likes of your program, the possibility of 9/11 being an inside job. That quickly triggered me to do a lot of research in haste at home, hoping to get reassurance that that wouldn't be the case. And unfortunately it was. As I could see, it was, damning evidence. I panicked. I went to my church minister to say what they were doing in this situation, and he just said, well, it's terrible, isn't it? Have you thought about checking out 7/7? Well, I thought, oh dear, I'd better check that out too. And now we're only talking 2 or 3 days to go before the assignment's due. So I took a day's annual leave and did everything possible, stayed awake for 24 hours. That too wasn't long before it was so obvious, Alex, that it was an inside job as well. There's just damning information out there. And that threw me in a problem, Alex, because I had to go to what we call an Intelligence Strategy Management Board on the 8th of July. And part of the assignment was a threat assessment that covered terrorism. And the component part would normally expect me to go along with all the government rhetoric and narrative on this, which would be to say that the large threat was essentially from Islamic terrorism. Well, I'm sorry. If 9/11 was an inside job and 7/7 was an inside job, how could it possibly rely upon government rhetoric to actually say that it was Islamic terrorists as the biggest threat? Because,
all right, Mr. Farrell, quick break. Stay right there. Absolutely, these are the big attacks. These are causing the large numbers of death. If that's an inside job, then you do the statistical analysis. Then government-sponsored terror is the most dangerous. We'll continue with where this led on the other side. So for 12 years, for the big city government and for the central government of the Home Office, the UK, he's an analyst looking at future terror threats, analyzing where the terror threat comes from. Well, if you're actually a real researcher, you would know that there was BBC, London Telegraph. I've got all the articles. Police seize files of spy linked to IRA murders. It goes on and on. Double agent was the real IRA's Omaha bomb team. And I've had these guys on. And hidden in all these articles, because they report on it, but they bury it, it turns out that 7 out of 10 IRA commanders, going back 50 years, on average, were British intelligence, staging terror attacks as a pretext to stay in Northern Ireland and to take the rights of Brits, now the most surveilled people on earth. But side issue, the point is that this stuff's all hidden in plain view. Now, Tony Farrell, their chief analyst, just a week or so out from this big report, in his research, he finds reality. And what happened when you brought them the report, sir? Please continue.
Well, the first thing I did, Alex, when this horrible realization occurred to me, I thought that I had to go and alert management. And I did that, Alex, with a briefing note, because we were getting very close to the deadline. This was the 6th of July. The deadline was required on the 8th of July. So I made it my business to alert management. I shocked them with a briefing note that gave all the hyperlinks. So I alerted them to your films. I alerted them to Loose Change and the compelling videos that were out there. That was on 9/11, and likewise with 7/7, the research, the compelling research. And I was saying to management, look, it's a case of Houston, we've got a problem here, and we need to have a look at it because things aren't the way they seem. And that shocked management, and they really, on the 7th of July, they really sort of tried to wrap me up in cotton socks, Alex, and tried me to go along with it and not rock the boat and go to the Intelligence Strategy Management Board on the 8th, disregarding what I believed to be the threat and just carry on as normal. I'd done all the work, so I was in a position where I could have actually carried out and handed over the assignment to their satisfaction. They'd have loved that. My problem was it would go against my conscience. And quite frankly, Alex, this was a case I couldn't keep silent on. Silence, it's not golden, it's yellow. And I wasn't going to be cowardly over this. I had to make a stance. It was a defining moment on the 5th anniversary, that 7th of July, 2010. I came to that decision in my own conscience that I must make the stand. And on the 8th of July, I went in and made my stance and refused to hand over the product that they wanted later on for that afternoon's presentation for the Intelligence Strategy Management Board. I was asked then to explain myself in a report. I was sent home, away from the office, where they did an audit of my computer, and I was asked to come back in a few days' time with a report that explained why I felt necessary to make the stand, which I duly did. I told them all the reasons. I made inferences on the strategic